back, everybody, to another edition of Pure Picks. Your host, James, and we will be going over Ribas versus Namajunas Fight Night here this weekend at Apex. Before we get down to it, I wanted to recap the last previous fight card. Not a good showing from us. Obviously, down 2.5 units, 2.53 units. Really bad play on Josh Holobaugh, even though that was probably a 50-50 fight at the end. We still paid the juice on that, and the juice was not worth the squeeze in that case. I thought it was a really close fight. However, I feel like Danny did have the bigger moments, and that led to the judges scoring the fight for him. So can't really complain about that decision. Brian Battle probably should have won that, to be honest. We all saw what Angelusa did. Kind of went out of the fight and didn't really want to fight anymore, because I think Brian Battle did really well in the beginning. Most likely was going to finish him, to be honest, because Angelusa has a really bad tendency of gassing. So I think that parlay with Battle and Moises would have hit if the fight continued. However, it came no contest, and we only had 2 units on Moises at the end of the day, so that kind of killed our winnings there. Going on to that next parlay, we have Holobaugh. Obviously, he killed that parlay. Next one we had was Corey McKenna over 2.5. I think in hindsight, that was a very dangerous over 2.5. Even initially, I was thinking usually in women's MMA, the more dangerous ones that are going to go under are going to be grappling based ones. And we know that Corey McKenna is a grappler. We know that Jacqueline's a grappler, and put two of them together, just a bad recipe for an over 2.5 there. So that's something that we'll take into account later on in the future. Parlay that did hit was Mike Davis, looked absolutely dominant there, and the over 2.5 for Nunez was a really good value as well. So that was a parlay that we're really proud of. Obviously, the over 2.5 for Mike Davis did not hit. So just seeing Nathan Levy in there, that was such a mismatch, and just wish that we played more on Mike Davis, maybe even go on an inside the distance prop for him. And just to cap it off, I think that this probably would have hit as well. Over 1.5 for Kennedy hit. Turned out to be a split decision win for OSP, so that was a pretty interesting fight there. Angelusa under 2.5 should have hit. So, I mean, the day could have been better, but there were just a few missteps along the way that caused us to lose 2.5 units. But we're always going to look forward and move on for next week, and we have a really good card this week to try to make back some of the losses that we attained this week. So let's just get right into it. This fight night, I think, is going to be an awesome fight night, actually. I know that there's going to be some fights on the card that people, might not see that are going to be a good fight. However, I think there's going to be some entertaining fights on here. So let's get started with the first one. We have Mohammed Usman versus Mick Parkin. It's going to be a heavyweight matchup. Obviously, Mohammed Usman, Kamaru's brother, he's 10-2, 4-1 in his last 5. And he's coming off that decision victory over Jake Collier, facing off against Mick Parkin, 8-0, 5-0 in his last 5. He's coming off of that decision win against Kyle Machado. If we look at the odds for this fight right now, we have Mick Parkin at -136, and Mohammed Usman is +116 right now. I am going to pick Mohammed Usman here. Last night when I was breaking this down, the odds were even better on Usman. I think he was a +120. Now he's a +116. Not too bad. But, I think for this matchup, it's going to be a classic, ugly, slow-paced fight. There's not going to be a lot of, I would say, high-paced action to this fight. Both of these guys fight very methodically. Usman, he fights a very slow-paced wrestling kind of base game, but he does have legit KO power. I think he tries to be a wrestler, but he really needs to improve on that if he wants to be considered a legit wrestler like his brother. He has 1.26 takedowns landed, 18% takedown accuracy. He does have good control once he lands the takedown, so he's able to cage push. He controlled Justin Tafa for 12 minutes. I think that he has good cardio also for a heavyweight. Actually, he controlled Junior Tafa, sorry, not Justin Tafa. He has good cardio for heavyweight. Nicknames the motor. I think he will remain active for the whole fight, fighting at that pace. I think that Mick's a typical UFC heavyweight that likes to grind on his opposition, make the fight ugly. Mick does have more proven wrestling in this matchup. However, I think that although the cardio is decent, I just feel that Usman will be the more dangerous fighter in this matchup. And that's why I'm leaning towards Usman outworking Mick on the ground and really testing his takedown defense and bottom game there. And also, he's going to have the power advantage here. So the pick here for me is going to be Usman via decision. I think this is a classic dog or pass fight between two heavyweights who are, somewhat durable and have good cardio for heavyweights. So I like the over 2.5 as well at minus 180. That could be another decent play. Right now, the odds are minus 160. So getting a little bit better value than I saw last night. So I think that over 2.5 and plus 116 for Usman is not bad. Usman could be a solid money line play. However, I would say he's a medium confidence there. I'm not sure if, it's getting closer to pick him right now. And I feel like I liked the odds a little better last night. So my pick here is Usman, but we'll move on to the next fight. Moving on to the next fight here, we have Igor Severino versus Andre Lima. Igor is 8-0, 5-0 in his last five, and he's actually coming off that win over John Nata Silva in the Dana White Contender Series about 5 months ago. Andre Lima, 7-0. He's 5-0 in his last five, and he's coming off that win via decision on the Dana White Contender Series as well. So it'll be both of these guys' UFC debut for both of them actually. So I mean, I think that the Dana White Contender Series fade is going to be probably can't do it here, but we'll see what happens. Look at the odds for this fight actually. Igor and Andre. So Andre's a minus 180, and right now he opened up at a minus 125. So there's been some steady favorite action on him. I think this fight could go a lot of different ways. I will lean towards Lima being the much cleaner fighter. I think it's going to be a close fight. I do see a potential finish here based on how both these guys fight. I just think Lima's the much cleaner fighter overall. I mean, he should have the takedown defense to keep things standing. I think Igor's going to need to put the pressure on Lima and make this a really gritty fight, a really wild brawl, because that fight suits him more. I do think that Igor is overall really solid. However, he just is really inconsistent in his striking technique and can be a bit wild. So that wildness in this matchup, I think that it will play into Andre's hands a lot more because he is a much cleaner striker. And he's not just a headhunter. He's able to work in the body and he has legit power shots as well. And also, Lima has a good mix of just grappling and striking. I think that his grappling is more so defensive based, but that's going to be a really good thing for him in this fight because he's going to be able to sprawl and really have good takedown defense as well and fight off subs from Igor. So I think that Igor, while he does bring a good skill set to this fight, I think that Andre Lima is going to be too well rounded for him and he's going to be too clean for him as well. So I'm going to lean towards Andre Lima being able to implement the game plan and just fight a clean fight. The pick here is going to be Lima inside the distance. However, I'm staying away from this for now. I think the over 1.5 right now, let's check what that is. It's minus 205. So last night when I was looking at it, it was minus 260. So I thought that was a bit high, and I'm kind of glad to see it's getting a little bit better as far as the odds for potential play there. So that's something that I might look at, minus 205 for the over 2.5. I think that's a much better value than where it was at minus 260. So I'm going to continue to monitor that, but I think that could be a decent play overall. Once again, Andre inside the distance. However, I'm not going to trust them enough just because both these guys debuts and really don't know and have much tape on them to see how they'll do an actual UFC fight. So we'll move on to the next fight. Moving on to the next fight here, we have Montserrat Rendon versus Darya. And I'm going to say Darya Z because I'm not going to try to pronounce that last name. That is a very difficult last name to try to pronounce right there. Montserrat Rendon 6-0, 5-0 in her last five. She's coming off that close split decision victory over Tamaris Vidal, where she was a really like decent sized underdog. So she pulled off the underdog win right there. Facing off against Darya Z 8-1, 4-1 in her last five, and she's coming off a KO victory, not in the UFC. So this will be her official UFC debut. Look at the odds for this fight right now. We have Darya at minus 190, opened up at a minus 180. So not much action either way. I think that this could also be another close fight. However, I think that whoever gets their game going on first will probably win the fight. And what I mean by that is, obviously Rendon is the grappler in this case. She's going to try to just grind her way into decision win, most likely. I think she's like 6 wins, and all 6 of her wins are via decision. So you guys see it right here. I mean, 3 unanimous decisions, 3 split decisions. So she always fights a close fight, and she always gets to the decision. So I think that's going to be her game plan. I think that she will be tough enough and will able to not be put away as easily as Darya's last few opponents, giving her that ability to just remain in the fight until the final bell. I think she's, Rendon, very strong and kind of plodding grappler. She's kind of slow, but she is strong. She likes to pressure forward, use the toughness to eventually get into a body lock, trip, takedown. Striking is just a really basic and slow, though, so you kind of know her game plan. Darya is probably the exact opposite. I mean, she's a pressure striker, likes to drown her opponents with high volume strikes at the range or in the pocket. I think she also likes to get into brawls on the feet. I mean, she has no issue doing that. Good toolbox of strikes, knees, leg kicks. I think the grappling and takedown defense is a bit of a concern and a huge question mark, especially at the UFC level. If you just watch her fight, I think her only loss in her career, she was taken down and ground and pounded, finished. And that was in 2022. So not sure if she has really sewn up that hole in her game. And because of that unknown, I will say that I'm going to take the known here of Rendon. However, I'm going to pass on this fight. I mean, I know that, Rendon's going to be a dog. Her odds are getting a little better day by day, but I'm not going to trust her enough because I feel like there is going to be such a gap on the feet that unless Rendon is able to just continuously implement her takedowns, she's going to be in for a rough night against Darya. And, she could lose her first decision here. So pick here is going to be Rendon via decision, but I'm probably going to stay away from this fight. Interestingly enough, Rendon via decision is plus 155. Her money line is plus 165. So that's kind of strange. I think that might as well go for the money line if you're on the Rendon side at this point. Let's move on to the next fight here. We have our boy Steven Nguyen versus Jarno Errens. Steven Nguyen, the Ninja, 9-1. He's 4-1 in his last 5. He's coming off that KO victory over AJ Cunningham on the Dana White Contender Series. So this will be his UFC debut. He's facing off against Jarno Errens, 13-5-1. He's 2-3 in his last 5. Coming off that decision loss to Seung-Woo Choi about 6 months ago. Looking at the odds for this fight right now, we have Steven Nguyen at minus 190. He actually opened up at a minus 300. So there has been some dog action that's been taken on Jarno Errens. I'm not sure I agree with that line movement. I mean, I feel like Jarno is going to be the worst fighter everywhere here. I mean, I think that, he does have some legit power, but I'm going to side with Steven here. I feel like he's better everywhere. The only concern that I really have is Steven Nguyen's UFC debut, right? We just don't have we have not seen him at the UFC level yet. He has fought on the Dana White Contender Series 3 times, went in 2-1 in those fights, but this is going to be his first official UFC fight. So, I think that's the only concern I have. I feel like this fight will likely go to decision. I mean, Aaron's very tough, and I think that I feel like Errens is going to be in Steven's face just trying to make things happen. So it could be closer on the scorecards. Going back to Steven, though, I mean, I feel like he's a legit prospect. He has a good all-around skill set in game, clean striking, has a nice 1-2. I feel like he's able to maintain a high volume and pace on the feet, chains together his combinations well with kicks. He can attack the leg, the body, and the head with his kicks. I also think that he's a solid grappler. Fights out of bad positions, does not accept bottom position. He's able to cinch in chokes, has a nice guillotine. I think that for Jarno, he's a striker who's able to mix in the grappling when he sees it. He has really solid toughness and power. He also has some good kicks, but I just don't think he's as dynamic as Steven Nguyen on the feet. So I think that Steven will really just outpoint him to a decision and potentially could be, I think, one of the few people, the first one to finish Jarno Evans via KO if he lands the right shots. So I'm going with Steven Nguyen here. We got to represent with our fellow Vietnamese brother here. So yeah, Steven Nguyen via decision. Potentially a parlay feast, but man, I just remember that we got burned by Josh Culibao, our Filipino Kuya, and I'm not sure if we want to go down the same track though. But I feel like this is the better play this week. I wish we kind of saved those 2 units that we put on Kuya last week on this week for Steven. So going with Steven to win. I'm gonna check the props right now to see what the props look like because they didn't release last night when I was looking at this. So Steven to win by decision, yeah, it's plus 115, which is what I expected. That's his most likely win condition. So I think that's solid, actually. Yeah, pick here Steven to win. Let's move on to the next fight here. We have Miles John versus Cody Gibson. This is going to be Miles John's 13-2. He is coming off that no contest, actually. So he won that fight, but I believe he got suspended or maybe popped for some Adderall. So it wasn't like PEDs specifically, but he got popped for Adderall. So they took the no contest away from him, or the win away from him and made that no contest. So he actually should be 4-1 in his last 5 because he did beat Dan Argueta in that decision. He's fighting against Cody Gibson, 19-9. Cody Gibson is 3-2 in his last 5, but he's coming off that decision loss to Brad Cantona. I think that was the Ultimate Fighter finale fight. So coming off a loss right now. Look at the odds right now. We have Miles John at minus 152. When I was looking at this last night, it was actually minus 128. So it's actually kind of close. And I wish that we put in some action there because I think minus 128 for guys like Miles Johns in this matchup was pretty good value. Just looking back at the kind of breakdown of this fight, I mean, I think that, I see another close fight. I feel like there's going to be a running theme throughout this card that there's going to be a lot of close fights that potentially could go decision and, could be a sweat for both sides potentially. I do think that I will side with Miles Johns here. I think that, both fighters will have a similar combination of being able to mix it up. I just think that this will come down to whoever has the better gas tank and that night and who has the better defense on the feet and on the mat. I feel like Johns showed a better fight IQ in his last fight, and I think he has come to the realization that he has to mix in his wrestling along with his striking to be a winning fighter because he did fall in love with his hands after a few KO wins in the past, and I think that after his last few losses, especially against Sexy Mexi, I feel like he realized that he has to, at least try to incorporate the grappling to defeat some of these guys. So he did that in his last fight against Dan Argueta, who I think is a good fighter, and I think he's going to continue that here against Cody Gibson. Johns is a wrestler, though. He's legit power in his hands. He likes to box, but he just can be low volume at times, waiting for that power shot. So I feel like he's going to go back to the wrestling roots because he does have that. He has some solid takedowns, top control. He has had cardio issues in the past. However, the last fight, I feel like he looked good. So, yeah, I feel like that's a thing of the past. Gibson, on the other hand, he's like a very long-range striker who has solid wrestling skills. I think that he has range attacks. He will stick jab, uses teep kicks as well to keep range. He can also mix in the takedown and remain active from bottom. And he's also a good sub threat, but he can also get subbed himself. I think he's like 4-4 in submission kind of ending fights. So he's been sub 4 times. He's been a sub people 4 times. So yeah, I think this guy, mix of both could be dangerous on the ground or he could get destroyed himself. Now his cardio it does tend to go when there's a high pace kind of volume fight. Now, Miles Johns, he doesn't really have that high volume kind of style, but I think that both these guys kind of have cardio issues at the end of the day. So I'm going to side with Miles Johns here just because I feel like he's just the better fighter overall. Now, pick here is going to be Johns via sub, but I'm staying away because I really do not trust Johns quite yet. He's going to have to prove it to me one more time before I kind of hop back on the train. But man, if you get closer to pick 'em odds, like at minus 128 as opposed to minus 150 right now, I think that's something that was a good play. But we'll see if that line goes back to that area. If so, then might have to put something like a half a unit on Miles John because I think he is the better fighter overall here. Let's move on to the next fight here. We have Ricardo Ramos versus Julian Erosa, Juicy J. Ricardo Ramos 16-5. He is 2-3 in his last 5. And he's coming off that submission loss to Charles Jourdain. He's fighting against Julian Erosa, 28-11. He is 3-2 in his last 5. He's coming off of that KO loss to Fernando Padilla. He also got KO'd by Alex Caceres. So it's back-to-back KOs for Julian Erosa, both in the first round. So looking at the odds right now, we have Ramos at minus 152, open up at plus 135. So we do have a line movement flip here. The dog became the favorite in this matchup. And I think that kind of is going to, bear some weight for this matchup. This is once again, I think it's another tough fight to cap. I believe that Ramos should be the favorite in this matchup. However, I think both fighters are just hard to trust. They both are able to be finished. Erosa, should have been, I think he would have been a good dog, perhaps 1 to 2 fights ago. However, the way that he has been KO'd in the first round back-to-back does not give me confidence in his ability to weather Ramos's dynamic striking. I will have to side with Ramos here as he's the fighter with more paths to victory and just has more durability than Erosa at this point. Ramos, he is a solid fighter, good combo of striking and grappling. He does like to use those flashy and dynamic strikes, spinning attacks. He has a wide range of striking attacks in his arsenal. Good BJJ capabilities, likes to use the backpack technique on the ground and take the opponent's back. I think that he can be stuck on his back himself. He's put in bad positions, so he's not, all the way there as a kind of jiu-jitsu fighter. Now, the part where he kind of impresses me is he actually has solid wrestling, and it kind of makes sense. He actually trains a team alpha male, so he has solid wrestling for being a jiu-jitsu guy, able to time his entries well. I think Erosa, well-rounded, solid veteran. He just has had too many durability issues for me. I mean, he has nice striking, though, uses his range. He's able to attack from different angles, mostly due to keeping his hands low. And I think that this is where keeping his hands low is more of a detriment for him, because keeping his hands low keeps him being hittable, right? And he can get KO'd at any point. So he's already been KO'd at 6 times in the UFC, and most of them have been pretty early. Aside from that, though, he's a solid grappler. I feel like if he does not get KO'd quick, he can be a really tough out because he has a lot of heart and a good gas tank. If you just look at his, he does pull out some decision wins and grind it out wins, right? He has some impressive wins on his resume. But once again, look at his last 3 losses via KO have all been in the first round. He got head kick KO'd once in the 3rd round even. I mean, he's been KO'd a lot. So I'm just not sure if you can trust Julian Erosa even as an underdog play here. I think that I'm going to side with Ramos once again. Inside the distance, I think is a potential solid play. However, that last loss that Ramos had just has me not trusting him 100% yet. So I'm probably going to stay away just because I was on the Ramos side against Charles Jourdain, and the way that he lost that fight was also pretty concerning. And I do feel like Julian Erosa has fought the better level of competition if you just look at over his resume. So this could be a potential step up for Ramos, and Erosa a potential step down. Just has all the makings of a stay away fight for me, and I'm probably just gonna hold off on it until I get some more footage and kind of, evidence that I can trust either of these guys in a matchup. All right, next up we have Trey Ogden versus Kurt Holobaugh. Trey Ogden, the Samurai Ghost. We have him at 16-6. He's coming off that no contest. However, he should have probably won that against Nicholas Mata. If you actually watched the fight, he was well on his way to a decision victory, probably even a submission victory, but it's a premature stoppage, and they made that into no contest. So unfortunately, he didn't get that win on his record. He's facing off against Kurt Holobaugh, 20-7. He's coming off of that victory over Austin Hubbard via triangle choke about 6 months ago in his UFC debut. I believe this guy has fought in the UFC for a very long time. I think he went actually like 0-6 or something in the UFC. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so before that, he actually lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he got 5 losses and 1 no contest in the UFC. So interesting stuff from that. Looking at this right now, the odds for Trey Ogden -152 open up at -150. So not too much line movement, obviously, but people are kind of going back and forth between going with Kurt or going with Trey here. I think that this is going to be, once again, I think it's going to be another close fight. It's going to be this fight card is going to have just a lot of close decision fights, in my opinion, or fights where either one side has the advantage in one area and the other has the advantage in the other area, and it could be a quick finish that way. But I think most of these fighters are pretty evenly matched. Then it kind of makes sense because if you look at the odds, there's a lot of close odds here. Not a lot of heavy favorites. Like mostly every fight is less than a 2-1 favorite, except for the main event. So I mean, yeah, just interesting odds there. Um, I'm gonna lean towards Ogden here. I mean, I feel like he's going to be just the fighter that I can trust more in this case. I feel like Kurt is gonna land more volume and pushes enough of the pace to just put Trey on his back foot. However, to really beat Trey Ogden, I think that you need to be entirely like a pressure fighter or someone that can do that for all 15 minutes. So because Kirk is going to be a little bit kind of in and out with his game style and game plan, I feel like Trey can get his game going at certain points in the fight, but it's going to be a very close fight to call. I mean, Trey Ogden, I personally like him as a fighter. I mean, I think he's a grappler first, and he has good athleticism as well. Trey is also a decent striker for being a grappling heavy fighter. Decent power in his strikes, good amount of club and subs in his career. I think Trey has a 14% takedown accuracy, so not the greatest takedown accuracy, but he will continue to shoot for takedowns, and he like single double legs to just try to get in the fight to the ground when he sees an opening for a level change, because on the ground in his jiu-jitsu game, that is where he shines. So I think that Trey, he does have a tendency to not push as best of a fight on the feet, like a pace on the feet. And he can have bouts of inactivity while he's patiently waiting to level change for a takedown. Waits a little too much for my taste, and it can look bad against a fighter who pressures him on the feet. But we saw in his last fight, Nicholas Mata, I mean, he was the one doing the pressuring, and he was the much better fighter overall. So, I think he had a great showing here. I think he's improved a lot since he's been in the UFC. Kurt, it's good striker, good jiu-jitsu skills on the mat. He can also work with combos on the feet as well. I think he counters pretty well and uses his footwork to get in and out, like I mentioned. Has a good, nice jab. Grappling is, good from top or bottom. I think he's also a sub threat. This guy loves to finish his fights. I mean, looking at his record, most of his wins are going to be via finish. Most of them are going to be, via decision. I mean, submission. So, he hasn't had the best run in the UFC in the past, but maybe he's turning a new leaf now. I just think this fight's going to be too close to call. I mean, I'm going to ultimately pass on this fight, but the pick here is going to be Trey Ogden by decision for me. Looking at the over, 2.5, I mean, it's -155 right now, so I think even that's a little sketchy. Fight goes the distance -125, so I mean, there's going to be a lot of close calls in this particular fight, and I'm probably just going to stay away from it because I don't think I have a good read one way or the other about how it's going to go due to how close it's going to be. Let's move on to the next fight, and we're at the main card of the night. We have Luis Paleo versus Fernando Padilla. Luis is 8-1. He's 5-0 in his last five. He's coming off that KO victory on the Dana White Contender Series, where I think he was an underdog. So he pulled off underdog win. He's fighting against Fernando Padilla, 15-5, 3-2 in his last five. He's coming off that decision loss to Kyle Nelson on Mexico Fight Night in September, I believe. Looking at the odds for this fight, we have Fernando Padilla at minus 160, open up at a minus 155. So interesting kind of line movement. Not too much in that regard. Man, I think I'm gonna have to fade Luis here. I mean, he's fresh off the Dana White Contender Series win, making his UFC debut. I just think although Luis has a very similar stylistic matchup like Kyle Nelson did with Padilla, I believe that Luis does not have the same veteran skill set as Kyle Nelson does. Padilla should be able to counter better in this matchup against a less experienced opponent, even on the back foot. And we saw him struggle against Nelson on that back foot. So, Fernando Padilla, he's more of a fast starter who likes to be on that front foot and march forward and throw at volume. He sets a nice pace. His striking defense does need some improvement. I mean, he can get cracked at times, but I think that he's a very durable fighter. So he kind of makes it up for it there. I also think that Padilla, he's able to also counter well. So even if he's on his back foot, I feel like he's going to be able to counter Luis here. The one negative of Padilla is I feel like he's, he doesn't have any takedowns at all. He has to kind of take advantage of scrambles or just grappling exchanges to get it to the ground, but he does have a sub threat on his back. So that's another, kind of ace in his hole, right? Yeah, I think that Luis is just going to try to pressure this guy because that's how he fights as well. He likes to just move forward. And I think that Padilla is going to be able to counter off this back foot better in this fight than he did against Kyle Nelson. So pick here is Padilla via KO. Actually, I'm pretty high on him. I mean, I'm kind of sold on him as a potential money line play. I was on him against Julian Erosa. That was a really nice odds at plus like 200 something. I remember I had that 10 months ago, and I went off him on Kyle Nelson because I feel like that was going to be such a trap, especially at Mexico Fight Night. So I feel like they're going to give him a pretty good matchup here, and I think Padilla is going to be the side here. So yeah, give me Padilla in this matchup. Moving on to the next fight on the main card, we have Billy Quarantillo versus Youssef Zalal. Billy Q, 18-5. He's 3-2 in his last five. He's coming off that decision victory over Damon Jackson, where he just showed off his cardio and his pace, especially in the later rounds. Facing off against Youssef Zalal, 13-5-1. He's coming off of three straight kind of non-UFC wins. He did get cut from the UFC because, he was kind of a boring fighter, but now he's back on short notice because I think he's replacing someone on short notice here. Looking at the odds for this fight, I mean, Billy Q actually opened up at a minus 300, which is kind of insane. And now he's on minus 160, which makes more sense to me. I think that minus 300 was definitely insane for a matchup like this. I mean, I do feel like Billy is going to be able to pressure and be in Zalal's face the whole fight. I just feel like this fight could be close because Zalal, he does a good job of maintaining distance and range management, and he can mix in takedowns to keep Billy on his toes. So I will lean towards Billy Q just being able to outwork Zalal to a decision. However, man, Billy's getting older. He's 35 years old, and his tendency to just rely on his chin does worry me. I don't think that will make much of a difference in this fight, though, because Youssef Zalal, aside from his last kind of three wins in the UFC, this guy was a decision machine. I mean, he didn't really knock out anybody. He kept on going to decision. So yeah, I think that his hands weren't that powerful, or his, even his strikes for the kicks He's just not a really threatening guy on the feet. I just think that, he does a good job of maintaining that distance, and he can mix in the takedowns to keep Billy on his toes. So I do feel like he likes to work on the outside and just keep it a technical fight. If he does that, this might be a close decision. However, I do like that Billy will keep on coming at him, and I think that his game plan should work well for this matchup. However, the chin goes when it goes, and as the age gets like more kind of advanced, you can go at any time. I mean, I'm not trying to I'm not saying that Youssef Zalal is Edson Barbosa on the feet. He's definitely not. But I feel like Billy's chin could go at any fight at this point, just because he's getting older and older. So yeah, I think Billy Q via decision. But I'm entirely passing on this fight. I think that there's not much value either side here. Let's move on to Peyton Talbot versus Cameron Simon. This is going to be a good fight, I think, between two young prospects. We have Peyton Talbot, 7-0. He is 5-0 in his last 5, and he's coming off of that rear naked choke win over Nick Aguirre on the UFC. Cameron Simon, 9-1. He is 4-1 in his last 5. He's coming off that loss with Christian Rodriguez, and loss is there, so he's 9-1 now instead of being undefeated. Looking at the odds for this fight, we have Peyton Talbot at -154, opened up at -110 at a pick'em. So he's becoming a huger favorite, and Cameron Simon is becoming a bigger dog here. Yeah, I'm not sure I quite agree with that line movement. I think that this is going to be another close decision fight. I think that it will depend on how the judges score the fight. On the feet, Peyton will be the better striker. However, Cameron does have that takedown game and that grappling game that he could work in enough to where he could, damage and control Peyton on the ground. I mean, if you look back at Peyton's last fight, although he did win that fight, man, he was dominated kind of in that first round against Nick Aguirre, who just stepped in on short notice, right? I mean, Nick Aguirre landed one takedown, and he controlled Peyton Talbot for 4 minutes and 50 seconds in a 5-minute round. So, I do think that Cameron Simon's a better grappler, and I just feel that that's enough of a grappling hold to where I would be very hesitant to play Peyton Talbot here. I'm just going to lean towards Cameron being able to outpoint Peyton on the ground and just keep it close enough on the feet. I mean, Cameron Simon's no slouch on the feet. I feel like he does have some skills there. He's a good striker, can mix it up on the feet. Good leg kicks, can do some knees, spinning attacks as well. The one area where I do see where he kind of falls is, he keeps himself getting open to getting countered, right? He doesn't have that good of a striking defense. However, his grappling is good. He can mix in the takedowns with his strikes. He has good scrambles and sweeps, although this kind of skill set and game plan didn't work for him against a guy like C-Rod, just because C-Rod's one of the best grapplers in that division. So he wasn't able to mix it up with C-Rod, but I feel like he can mix it up here. And he has a good pace and pressure on the feet and fights with good cardio. So, Peyton Talbot, it's a very good striker, fights at a frenetic pace. He gets into a lot of brawls, but he just moves forward and just wants to break people with that pressure. I do think he has legit power, though, and volume. His striking defense could improve. However, he's a pretty durable guy. His takedown defense is just super weak, and I feel like he can just get out grappled. He does have good cardio. Yeah, I mean, just taking it all into account, I feel like Cameron Simons is going to be the more well-rounded fighter here, and he has the game plan of a underdog that could be a potentially solid dog. So I actually like the play on Cameron Simon plus 134. I actually like those odds and that value. So yeah, that's something that I potentially could look to attack there. Let's move on to the next fight on the main card here. We have Edmund Shabazian versus AJ Dobson. Edmund Shabazian, he's that golden boy. He had a lot of hype coming into the UFC, started off his UFC career really well, and, since been kind of dominated by grapplers in the last few fights. He's 12-4. He's 1-4 in his last 5, and he's actually coming off that loss against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez via KO ground and pound. AJ Dobson, 7-2. He is 3-2 in his last 5, and he's coming off of that decision victory over Stefan Chukwi. Looking at the odds for this fight right now, we have Edmund at -194, open up at -185. Yeah, I think that Edmund will just be able to outpoint AJ in the feet. Edmund is a good karate style kind of striker, good in and out movements, and I just think he's going to be the quicker striker here. He's going to have the more dangerous power here too, in my opinion. The only opportunity that I think that AJ will have to win this fight is that if you can throw in that wrestling that he has, right? AJ does have some wrestling. He has some good power takedowns. He has a 75% takedown accuracy, 1.82 takedowns landed every fight, so he can mix it up. But I just don't think that he's on that level of the previous grapplers that Edmund has fought thus far. I mean, just look at Edmund Shabazian's record, right? Like, he has fought Derek Brunson, Jack Hermanson, Fluffy Hernandez, even Imavov. I mean, these guys are all pretty decent grapplers, kind of ranked fighters. So he's had the much tougher strength of competition. AJ Dobson hasn't had that impressive of a record, in my opinion, and level competition. So I think Esmond Shabazian should be able to be the better fighter here. But this is going to be a spot where I'm probably just going to stay away myself, just because I feel like AJ does theoretically have that skill and that game plan to be able to ground Edmund, and I've seen Edmund just being ground so many times. But, pick here is going to be Edmund via decision, but I'm probably going to stay away from this fight as well. Looking at the co-main event of the night, we have Carl Williams versus Justin Tafa. Justin obviously is coming in for his brother, Junior Tafa, so they're kind of replacing each other in their fights. Carl Williams, 9-1. He's 5-0 in his last 5, and he's coming off of that decision victory over Chase Sherman, fighting off against Justin Tafa, 7-3. He's coming off of a KO win over Austin Lane. Looking at the odds for this fight right now, we have Carl Williams at -172, open up at -250. I think that I'm going to lean towards Justin Tafa in this matchup, actually. I mean, I did not like what I saw with Carl Williams in his last fight against Chase Sherman. I know that he won that fight. However, it just looked very concerning because when his takedowns were getting stuffed, and it looked like he was also getting a little bit gassed too, he just could not get his striking going, right? He's mainly uses his hands for his boxing, but this guy just did not get his hands going. He was also getting his legs chopped up by a guy like Chase Sherman. I mean, I feel like Chase Sherman is not as good a striker as Justin Tafa. Justin Tafa is a good kickboxer, one-shot KO power, has a variety of power shots. He likes to throw the leg kick, target the body. I mean, he also likes to counter as well. I feel like Justin just has the game of, I don't think he's ever even been taken down the UFC, although, he hasn't really stuffed too many takedowns, but is a 100% takedown defense, likes to sprawl and brawl. I feel like he has the exact game plan to beat a guy like Carl Williams. Carl is a solid fighter. I mean, he's a solid wrestler, good entries and takedowns for heavyweight, good control. However, his striking is just average, and maybe even below average. So I feel like Justin will stuff enough takedowns to get to a KO victory and just really KO this guy. So I think the pick here is going to be Tafa for me. I think he's a solid dog play at +147. Even if you want to play him at the Justin Tafa by KO +185, that's not even that bad to me, in my opinion. Get some more juice on that prop. So yeah, give me Justin Tafa here as a solid dog play. Let's move on to the main event of the night. We have Amanda Ribas versus Rose Namajunas. This is going to be in the flyweight 125-pound division. So both ladies are kind of staying for that division there. Ribas, 12-4. She is 3-2 in her last 5. She's coming off that really good victory, actually. I watched that fight live, and it was a really good KO victory, come from behind kind of victory against Luana Pinheiro. Thug Rose, 11-6. She is 3-2 in her last 5. She's coming off that decision loss to Manon Farrow. And that was also kind of a close fight as well. Look at the odds. It has gotten pretty wide. I mean, Rose Namajunas at minus 300 opened up. Now she's minus 275. She was minus 280 earlier when I was looking at it. Last night it was like minus 200. So there's a lot of line movement just from last night. Yeah, I mean, I got to go with Rose here. I know that the odds are a little wide, which is probably why I'm not going to play them. But I think that she's going to be better than Ribas everywhere. I think the size and striking of Manon Ferro really put Rose at a disadvantage in her last matchup. And even that was a close fight. I mean, you saw that Rose has the skill set of a champion. So Ribas just will be the worst striker here, the worst technical striker, and the smaller fighter here. So I feel like Rose is going to have a lot of advantages here. Rose is just a skilled fighter. I mean, striking's clean. She uses the feints, has head movement, has a nice hook, really good footwork as well around the cage. You know, speed of the strikes is pretty above average. She also has a great head kick. I mean, she KO'd Zhang Weili with that head kick. Good grappler, both offensively and defensively. So I think that she's good with takedowns, great timing, able to stay active on the bottom position, and she has a variety of subs in her toolbox. So she is really well rounded. Ribas also is pretty well rounded. However, I think that her striking, although it's good and she can kind of push a solid pace, she really gets sucked into these brawls at times. And she has been proven to have been KO'd before. I mean, like 4 losses. 3 of those losses have been KO'd, and 2 of them in the UFC. I mean, I also watched the Macy Barber one live, and she just went into a brawl with Macy Barber, who's a much more powerful striker than her. So I do question her fight IQ at times. Her last fight even was a brawl as well. So I feel like she just gets sucked into those kind of fights. Um, Her striking defense just really could use some work as well, because I don't think that she's as durable as she thinks she is. Now she does use the judo throws, good takedowns in this kind of area, but I feel like her the cardio and the advantages that she's gonna have is just not gonna be there against a fighter like Thug Rose. So give me Thug Rose here. I do think minus 280 is a little wide, so I'm probably gonna hold off on that. I liked the odds a little bit better last night when it's like minus 200. So kind of wish I got it on that before, but hopefully it comes back and we get a much better price on Rose. But yeah, this is gonna be a main event 5-round fight. I gotta side with Rose here because she has the championship experience. That about does it for the breakdown of UFC Fight Night, Namajunas, Ribas versus Namajunas. I think this is actually going to be a really entertaining kind of card. Like I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of close fights. Look at all these odds. I mean, everyone is like a minus, less than a minus 200. So I feel like we're going to see a lot of scorecards. We're going to see some, potential fast finishes as well. So, I think that, yeah, pretty entertaining fight card overall. Hopefully, we will have some great plays for you guys on Friday when kind of releasing a Bet MMA tips. But once again, purepicks.gg. Feel free to just check that out. That's where you get our Pure Pick Pros membership. That about does it, guys. I'm James, and I'm going to be out. Best of luck to everybody this week.